You can find this recorded in the meeting chat or on Microsoft Stream. Got it. Okay, I've never done this before, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Okay. Welcome. I am excited that everyone is here. We are going to be working today on thinking about social media and how we can use it in the current environment, but also just for continuity of purpose in our work and what we do. I know that, you know, some of us have been banging this drum of social media for some time, and sometimes when we need to advocate last spring, that definitely came up, but also just in general in ensuring that your students and your families and your staff and the school district and our state association, that everyone is aware of the work that you are doing. I know that in our Job Alike days, on our red days, one of the pieces inside our agenda each week is your brag, or your what are you gonna share? What are you gonna talk about? And I kind of feel like the 3+me is like a mantra for, like, if I've done something, do 3 other people besides myself know that this is happening. And now, especially that we're out of our building, and Mary, to acknowledge, yes, how hard yesterday and the announcement was, thank you, that we are out of our buildings and out of our libraries until the end of the year, that we are away from our students. I think thinking about and putting that lens on our work today and how we maybe approach our use of social media in this environment, I think is really something to keep in mind. I'm just going to pause for a minute if there's anybody who actually would like to address or say anything about the fact that we're not going to be back at school.
I've seen a lot of people on social media really upset, but I don't know, my personal story is that I lost my first husband, so I know what grief is, and I'm actually like super relieved. I know that like my students are really important and I'm going to miss them, but mostly I don't want anyone to die. And I'm just so glad we're in a state where we're taking care of people. And I know there's a whole social aspect that's going to be difficult for our kids, and like my teen is really struggling with that, but I'm super relieved. But that's me right now. Tomorrow I might change my mind.
Yeah. There are stages in that grief, right, Debbie? Right? For sure. For sure. It's hard to keep that in perspective. I have a senior who's missing his first and only varsity season, who likely won't walk or graduate or go to prom or like all these things. And so, yeah, it's real for sure.
And just the extreme concern for those kids that school was a safe place to be, where they knew they were loved and fed and there was continuity. I'm having a hard time right now.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Mary. All right. I am delighted, honestly, that we've had just a moment to stop and pause. I think that it really can frame kind of our work going forward. I apologize for those of you that maybe are already on social media. Like, I want to start from the very beginning, just in case there are folks who are not. There are quite a few of us maybe that are not currently using either Twitter or Instagram. Those are the 2 platforms I'm going to talk about primarily, to share information, to communicate with families, to promote your library, to serve as a professional development tool, all of these pieces. I did create for you a PowerPoint presentation. So I will go ahead and get started. Welcome to Social Media and Your Library. There are 3 like primary platforms that we are going to talk about throughout the presentation today. The first 2, Instagram and Twitter, are going to be the 2 that I'm going to focus on the most. The reason that I put Facebook on this front page is because there are a number of schools that have community Facebook pages, and if you have a strong presence in that particular environment, considering just how you might use Facebook, whether you're promoting your Instagram or Twitter feed on a Facebook page in your community, or even if you decide to create a Facebook page, because that's where the majority of your families are. I just didn't want to ignore that as a potential venue for continuing to communicate with families and advocate and share the work that you do. In considering your intended audience, I do want to start really quickly by acknowledging as well where a large majority of this presentation came from. This is not my brainchild. I have borrowed, begged, and pleaded for help, right? As I've been learning, as I've continued to do this. And so Tuesday was able to make connections with a librarian. I believe her name was Martha from a school and an organization in Georgia, school library organization in Georgia. And so a large majority of what's presented today comes from work that they've already done. Georgia has an incredibly strong school library community, and there are quite a few, like you look at the announcements every year from ALA and for who's being nominated for what awards, and a large majority of them do come out of the state of Georgia. So we're going to go back to Instagram, the literacy focus, books, humor, community of librarians, usually reaching out to students or younger parents. I threw on the younger parents piece only because it occurred to me that, gosh, I have students of people I went to school with, and that as the age demographic is constantly changing, and our kindergarten students, for example, to consider how old their parents are, that they may also be choosing Instagram over Twitter. And so just to think about like how, which audience you're trying to reach at this point in time, and what platform they may be most interested in. For Twitter, information engagement, majority of followers are here, and a community of learners. Our superintendent uses Twitter. That's the advocacy piece, really, truly. Like when you know the rubber hits the road, this is where our superintendent is looking to see what's happening in our schools. And it's been really great throughout, you know, just her tenure. I think it has shifted the dialogue slightly. I can't, you know, measure that, but I do think that she is more aware now of the work that we do than when she first started this job. And she has been responsive to a lot of tweets across all of our schools. So that was the other thing to keep in mind. So the first question, if you have not started, your own social media account, some things to consider when you're creating your handle. For me, it was really, really easy because I was starting at a brand new school. And so we hadn't done anything and nothing was pre-established. And so I just sat down with our principal and we decided like what was going to be the direction we were heading. How could we make it easiest for parents to find? But the first thing is that, does it represent your school and your library? I know many of us have had this like crossover, especially early adopters have had this crossover. I created my personal account and now I use it more as a professional account, which is totally fine. This is really more of, if you're just starting, to think about maybe how does your handle represent your school. The examples I've given are Beaver Readers, Library Links, and the Native Ed Library. That the first two actually are connected to high schools and a mascot, and the second one is very clearly named. It's for our Native Ed Library here in Seattle. Is there continuity that can be followed? This is just my example at Eagle Staff. We have Eagle Staff MS, Eagle Staff LIB, Eagle Staff ASB, we have Eagle Staff Band. And so it was just a really natural place for parents to go. It's easy for them to find. If you are going to maintain more than one platform, if you're going to create an Instagram and a Twitter, to consider if you could potentially carry over the same username. It's super easy for folks. Oh, wait, I'm this on here and I'm this on here, and it can be hard for folks to find you. And if we're trying to like break down those barriers and get people to us, this is really something to just think about. Again, it's a little harder to do if you're already established, but not impossible. And as best you can, make it easy to remember. Say, hey, you should follow the library at Reading Marmots. And so these are all the examples I give you throughout the presentation are all examples from Seattle Public Schools librarians. So they are available to you as you continue through this presentation to follow. Once you've created an account or two, be sure to add them to our SPS librarians list. I've linked here. This link takes you to a Word document that was started by Tuesday a number of years ago now. And the intent is that we can use it to connect with each other, to make sure we're following each other and elevating each other in the work that we do. In addition to that, the other day was National Librarians, School Librarians Day, and I was putting a tweet out there, and I wanted to be able to put everybody who is already on in this tweet or tag them and make sure that everybody was in that. I went back to this list, and I was able to go through this list and identify who I could tag in that post. I'll pause for just a sec, just in case you have any questions.
Rebecca, this is Barb, and I'm not requesting control, but the bar that has all the, what do you call it, the banner with the video, and it's right where the list is, and every time I try to hyperlink to it, I get that instead of the, can we put the SPS list in the chat, is what I'm saying.
Oh, sure. Tuesday, are you able to do that?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay,
sorry.
Thanks.
It's a logistics.
No, it's fine, and I'll make sure that this is available after the presentation as well. But we'll try and get that list in the chat for sure. Because if you have one already and it's not on the list, you could add it while we're talking today.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Great. Okay. Types of social media. This is specifically just for a couple of slides. We're going to address the types of posts and what you may be doing. And the first one is just reposting content and just some guidelines to consider when you're doing this. Quality content from other library media specialists, highlighting the work of library media specialists in Seattle, Washington, sometimes nationally, articles or their content, library events. And the one that I pulled up is a tweet from Erin this last week. And Claire over at Lincoln had worked with this document that came from Santa Barbara City College, and she'd adapted it into a super slick infographic about how to create a checklist of Zoom safety settings. And knowing that a lot of us were on the front lines and helping support our staff and using Zoom ourselves, or at least wanting to use Zoom ourselves for meetings with students and staff, this was really helpful, and you want to get it out as far and as wide as possible. And so a couple of things, Erin retweeted this is the first thing. And so it elevates that. You can see that down at the bottom, this tweet had a particularly high response rate. So 635 people retweeted, which is great. It's phenomenal. That's not the norm. Don't make this your expectation for everything you put in Instagram or Twitter. Maybe some of you have it, incredible followings like this. That's not the case for me. It doesn't stop me from doing it. But that I just want to point out, if you look and you're but only 2 people liked my tweet, that's great. Good place to start. There is a way to see analytics, and I can show that to you in just a little bit so that you can actually see how many people potentially your posts are reaching. Couple of things that she did do here are that she included the image in the retweet, and she also included, you can see it says @ReaderPants. That's one of Claire's handles. Claire has a few. She also happens to be at Library Links as well, one of the first ones we mentioned. But ReaderPants came from her work she was using this prior to her work with SPL. In addition, it also includes Zoom and Zoom guidelines. And so thinking about, we use hashtags for making sure that we can find things easier, or we can help other people find things easier. Searching, the hashtags are a way, they're like keywords or power words that help when you're searching for things. Okay. Original content. This is an Instagram post from Beaver Readers, BHS. This is Tuesday over at Ballard. And For original content, just thinking about program ideas, book recommendations, use of digital tool for a lesson. Here she's, very clearly saying, right, I'm not trying to make money for any particular person or event. Good news, a lesson template, Canva, and then she notes that Canva has a specific template for designing Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook graphics. Tuesday, did you use Canva or Adobe Spark for this particular graphic?
For this one, I used Adobe Spark, which Kelsey Klug, who is at McClure, sat with me, and she might be willing to do it with some of the other people on this call. I have zero graphic design skill. When I say zero, I mean less than zero. And this is not one of my best ones, so I'm sorry you picked it. But it's so easy, and when Kelsey teaches you.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's Kelsey. Kelsey's over at, you said McClure, correct? Yes. And
yes. Hi,
yep,
I'm
and
at
she's
McClure.
on the call.
I'm happy to talk with people if they want. Also, I'm just going to point out, Adobe Spark also has Instagram and Facebook specific sizes.
Yeah.
Cool.
You bet. And Kelsey, if you're available one-to-one, if you are at all considering maybe offering a half hour, 45 minutes or whatever about Adobe Spark, I know there'd be lots of interest. On Friday, I am also just offering another hour where if some folks want to come learn about Canva, I'm happy to start and walk people through that. Cool. Thanks, Kelsey. One of the things we're going to do in just a little while is kind of go over the anatomy of a post. And one of the most important things in a post is to have a graphic of some kind, whether it's a photograph, whether it's a graphic you've created. And we just have so many powerful tools available to us that you can really make these things eye-catching for the students and families that are looking at them. Types of social media posts, community engagement. So I use my Twitter and my Instagram in two different ways. My Instagram is really geared more towards students. It's a way for the library to extend the services of the library for students. The larger majority of my students are on Instagram, but I use Twitter for not only my own professional development and connections with colleagues, but also for communicating with parents. At this point, I still have more parents following on via Twitter. It's also the tool that my principal chooses to use. It's, again, the tool that the superintendent is using. And so really working towards wanting to make sure that I'm engaging our community there as well. And so some of the types of community engagement posts are, what are you doing today? Share a picture. How do you, I don't know, do puzzles in your school library? Set a goal for yourself for posting that's reasonable, and consider a regular post like #ColdShelf, Where I Read, or Seattle Super Readers. And so I do probably once a week, I do an Eagle Staff Prime post, and my Eagle Staff Prime post is really like looking at our daily hold shelf. Eagle Staff Prime, we deliver books to students every day, first period. And so this was just one morning that week. This is actually the morning before we found out school was going to be canceled. But we were able to get all these books out and into the hands of students before, before we knew that school was going to be closed, but two, before first period. So they were waiting and ready for them. It's been great to have that option to be able to use that delivery, but also sharing this with people on a regular basis also gives them an opportunity to stop and look and see what kids are reading. Those of you that might be Project Lit chapters or know about Project Lit, you can see the large majority of the books on this shelf are Project Lit books, which are really popular at our school. Any questions to date? Thanks. Okay. Social media posts and advocacy. This is a post from Instagram last spring, the day that we went to the steps of the Capitol. And I had been, and many of us had been using social media at that point, really truly to increase visibility, to advocate for reversal of the decision to cut secondary librarians at that point. And my Twitter and Instagram really became the place where I could share the most. And really interesting that it was never something that I was essentially sharing what was happening and still continuing to share my work, but building advocacy into that. So a lot of my Twitter posts, for example, if I had like an image for the day, I would black out half the image. And one of the hashtags we were using at the time was "you get half," right? So a picture of two kids reading and you basically black out half the image and you get half. But there's some really powerful things we can do with images, with sharing, with connecting with each other. And so some of the types of advocacy isn't always about there's a problem, we're trying to fix it. Advocacy is about, in this moment, how do we ensure that people know what we do, right? There's still crazy misperceptions about what we do. I think the fact, sorry, go ahead. I think that there's still some pretty misguided misperceptions about what we do. I think that that's, one of the reasons that that we ended up on the list of potential childcare providers. But I think that we are continuing to inform the public, and we do continue to build relationships with our families. And especially now that we don't get to see them every day, that we don't get to be with our students and with our colleagues in our buildings, that continuing to find ways to connect is part of advocacy. This isn't just about raising a ruckus when something's going wrong. So it can be a call to action, but definitely breaking down barriers between what people think we do and what we actually do. Pictures are incredibly powerful, right? To see students engaged in activities, to have quotes from students, to show work from students, putting students at the center of how we advocate for what we do for them is really important. Having talking points, connections with local, state, and national leaders, professional development and WLA, and legislative news. Like, these are all places and things we can do to continue to advocate and move forward in our use of social media. Does anybody have questions about this idea of advocacy? One of the things that concerns me is that when we say the word advocacy, that maybe there's this like guttural reaction to, oh, I don't want to cause problems, or I don't want to be that person. But this whole idea in general that that advocacy more is legitimately about sharing your work and making sure that people know the work that you're doing and see the work that you're doing. I just thought maybe it would be worth taking a minute to pause and talk about advocacy. Has anyone ever had any pushback? Have you ever been in a position where you felt like your presence on social media was being challenged or questioned? Thought I'd just pause for just a second. Okay.
Rebecca?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to figure out, in the realm of K-8,
Yep.
I understand about the reach out to parents and promoting what I do as a librarian.
Yeah.
But as a middle school, how much use do your students use the platforms, the social media platforms with you?
I believe I have about 160 middle school students that follow me on Instagram. And right now, honestly, that's growing every day. Posting it on my Schoology, sharing it with families. And so right now, that is the place where I'm getting the most social media traction with students outside of Schoology, right? And so that's actually one of the things that, you know, as we consider what our digital environment looks like as we move forward right now, thinking about, you know, connecting with families, with parents, in order for them to know how to get to a book club or a new resource or those kinds of things at the elementary level makes perfect sense. At the middle school level, you know, it's for me on Instagram, it's far more about like program promotion. I'm going to be at a book club yesterday. I was able to pull up Instagram, put a post up for Jerry Craft's New Kid, put a timer and a countdown. So that kids can see that. I'm able to put links in there for, you know, continued reading promotions that we're doing. I do feel like for middle school, they're using Instagram. Yeah, they're using Snap and they're using TikTok and all of those other pieces, but there still is a decent portion of students who are using Instagram because that is a place that they're still going to share with their friends.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a lot of you here. I want to pause for just a little bit longer to answer, quite frankly, any questions at this point in time. If you have any questions, we can pause for just a second and see where we are.
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Paula.
Hi, Paula.
And hi. And I'm wondering, so I'm in elementary. So in theory, those children do not have social media accounts. They're always going through their parents in theory.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about like, if I wanted to do something that is parents posting like a picture of where the kid's reading, like snuggled down sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm not posting their picture. If I put a hashtag and figure out a hashtag, is that how they post it, or how does that work? Because so far what I've done is just post my stuff on my own personal one and one on the public one.
Yeah, if you're going to encourage parents to post and you want them to, I would include, for example, where I read is a hashtag that's kind of been going around Seattle Public Schools. So you would instruct them to include the hashtag where I read and then use your handle. Ask them to include either in the post itself at, you know, what's your handle, Paula? Oops, I couldn't hear you. You were muted.
West Woodland Library.
Awesome. Very easy to remember. So, and ask them to either tag, right? There's an option on a photo to tag so that it just shows it's hidden but still there, or to actually include it in the text of what they're posting. At West Woodland Library, look where my kid reads, where I read, Seattle Super Readers, but give them also give them a script. Like if you're going to send an email home, like include both those things there and like maybe even give them a script for what they would post. But that would be how they could connect with you directly, is to tag your handle specifically.
Can I say what I do?
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm interrupting. This is very hard. I actually created a private group. So we at Hazel Wolf have a community Facebook page, and we have a Facebook page for every grade. It's kind of nuts how many parents are on Facebook. So then I went to I created my group. It's a private group. They have to ask me for permission. And when I get people who are asking to be in, I look to see if those parents are part of our community. If they're not, I send them a message. What is your connection to Hazel Wolf? And when they don't reply, I deny them being part of it. I don't want community members. I want it to only be parents. So this private group, I sent an invite. I was like, please join the Hazel Wolf private group, library group, to all of the grade level teams. And, you know, I've got like 300 members right now. So I can post pictures of the students. And when I have parents go like, wait, you're putting my kid's picture on Facebook, I'll say, hey, listen, this is a private group. You are the only people who see this. If you don't want me to do that, I can take it off. And as soon as I explain that, they go, oh, okay, that's great. That's totally fine. I was so happy to see pictures of my student. And I'll tell you what, you have like a celebration or you have like a special reading day and you put pictures of kids doing all that reading, they love it. They eat it up. And I can also post myself doing readings and, you know, have that link that I put in there, and those parents will share that with the students.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's primarily Facebook, Debbie?
What's that?
Facebook?
Yeah, that's where a lot of my parents are. Mm-hmm. My middle school students are on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one more question. This is Paula again.
Go
So
for
I'm full of ideas. So I was thinking for Poetry Month that it would be fun to like read a poem on the Instagram story, one a day. But then I'm worried about copyright, but it's such a small piece. If it's just one poem, as long as I say where it's from, it should be fine, right?
That I'm not a copyright lawyer. If anybody happens to be, feel free to share that. I can tell you, like, for example, Stacia has been doing a read aloud. She's been reading a chapter a day from Coyote Sunrise. She's doing it on Instagram Live. You know, the other thing is that even if you're adding it to your story, for example, it stays for 24 hours and then it's gone on Instagram. So at that point, you're not recording, publishing, and distributing. So I think that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, there's some wiggle room. Again, not a copyright lawyer, but I think citing sources and giving credit and not like intending to create a repository of recordings that you're then publishing and making available to students gives us a little bit more flexibility as far as read alouds go with families. Stacia's use of Instagram Live for her read alouds, it's live. She's not, as far as I know, she's not recording this and posting it. I do have a number of teachers in my building who are recording videos and posting of themselves reading and posting them on Schoology. The idea then there is that those go away at the end of the year, right? We're not archiving these and saving them, but using them as instructional tools. I think that the argument can be made that your read aloud is akin to, in this moment, reading in front of a class. It just happens to be broadcast at that point.
Can I jump in on that too?
You may.
I took a webinar last week, like a week ago, about copyright and fair use practices at this time. And so there's two things I want to say. So one is, yes, publishers have been posting their kind of asks for what we do if we're going to do a read aloud, and most of them are just saying, please let us know, send us an email, tell us what portion you're going to read, tell us what platform you're reading on. That's what Stasia's been doing for her read alouds. But this fair use webinar that I went to, the copyright lawyers that they were interviewing basically said, you don't even have to get permission technically at this point. Like, if you're thinking about what the student, what the goal is of you sharing, and I'm looking at my notes and it said, like, approach this fair use question from a goal view. And if your goal is a transformational experience for your students, then it's a fair use, and you don't actually have to get permission from the publisher. And that these lawyers said, even if the publisher wrote back, like, even if you did submit an email to the publisher and the publisher wrote back to you and said, no, you still get to use it as fair use. So again, I'm not a copyright lawyer, but this is what copyright lawyers were saying. I can look for the link to that Zoom webinar if people want it. It was like an hour and a half, so you might not want to read the whole thing. But basically, publishers are asking you to let them know if you're going to be reading a chapter of something, which is a little different than reading a poem. But under fair use, if you've determined that what you're doing meets these purposes, and if the goal is student focused, then you can even disregard if the publisher says no. So I say, and they also were emphasizing that, like, don't be overly cautious and put students at the forefront of what we're doing, which we are all doing anyway. So I would say go for it.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. That's super helpful.
Could I add just one thing?
Yep.
This is Elaine. Generally speaking, it has been under fair use that if you are using something for educational purposes, like reading to kids or whatever, and as long as you are not intending to make any money off of doing this, then what you are doing and using falls under fair use protections, and you do not have to seek permission from publishers.
Thanks, Elaine. Okay. I'll pause for just another minute. It's kind of nice. It feels a little weird. I know you all have done this, but like stopping to give a presentation when you're not actually seeing people is a little weird. to continue to talk and not have the interaction with an audience.
Hey, Rebecca, this is Merrick. I have a question about posting pictures.
Yeah.
So if I started a Twitter handle and started something and then parents could post it on their Twitter, is there still a way to post pictures of kids like on Schoology at all? I'm just thinking for elementary, like the kids like to see each other.
Yeah.
And they're not really on social media. I'm just wondering, is there a way to post that internally at all, or is it only externally?
You could post internally on Schoology. You could, for example, include a Padlet link. If you haven't used Padlet, Padlet's a pretty cool way to share photos. You could create a Flipgrid and post the link into Schoology. What that does is when you're in Schoology, it embeds that grid into your Schoology page. That would be one way. When you create either those Padlets or Flipgrid, those are just the first two that came to mind for me. Then when they open it, I think I can show you really quickly on mine. Let me see. Can you all see my screen? This is my Schoology page, and in my materials, I have a link to a Padlet. This happens to be pictures of books, but they could be uploading pictures of themselves here and sharing a little note that would look something like this, and then they could be browsing through it. That's one possibility if that was something you were interested in, but that would be you create a password on it that it keeps it from, because a Padlet you could follow a link outside of Schoology, but if you create a password on that, it could lock that down. The same thing is true with Flipgrid. So that's one possibility. Merrick, does that help a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Mary Bannister. There's another way to do it in Schoology, that you can create a media file and an album, and so kids could post their picture there in the album. Like I made a album where they could post the cover of the book they're reading, but also they could post the where they're reading type Seattle pictures too.
Cool. Thanks, Mary.
Okay, this is Merrick one more time. Sorry.
Yep. No, it's fine.
I also noticed in your Schoology page that you had a book club. Can you, this is probably a little off topic, but how are you running a book club with so many students?
That's an excellent question. I also know I'm not the only one. So I know Tuesday has her book club that's still going. And there are a number of you that are doing that. For me, we're choosing kids that want to join. We're choosing titles that are available on Hoopla, a free streaming service through Seattle Public Library. That the announcement was made in Darcy's email that all elementary school students will have in the coming weeks. And so they have Hoopla, because it's streaming. You don't have to place holds right now. Looking for books on Libby, if you're looking for one book on Libby, it's going to be checked out and you're going to have to place a hold. But if you're open to searching for random things, you can find things on Libby. But Hoopla, because it's a streaming service, and Claire Scott also sent out an email yesterday, there's some other streaming services that SPL is making available. That means that students who want it can have it right away. And so we read New Kid first, because why not, right? And then give students some time to read the book. I have instructions for how to access Hoopla. Then we met yesterday. I had 12 kids show up. I had to change the time from our original scheduled time, so I lost a few that way. But that was because our school actually published a schedule after it already scheduled our first meeting, so we had to adjust slightly. But and then we're using Teams right now. And so that's where they're meeting, and that's how we're getting.
Sorry, I think my concern is that I've had parents say, "Oh, we'd love to do a book club," and I'd love to run a book club. I'm just concerned that there's going to be way more than 12 kids.
Yeah, and
that would take me up on that.
In the end, honestly, my first meeting with I had an open library hour. I had over 50 kids, and we're still trying to navigate. Some of us are comfortable and confident using Zoom and continuing to move forward in that fashion. And others are still using Teams. For an event with a higher attendance, Zoom is honestly, it's my preferred medium. You can have kids raise hands, you can lock the environment down, you can control, they can see each other, which is huge. Like that's honestly the largest reason kids are like coming to these things online is because they want to see each other. But that maybe is something that we could talk about in a separate piece. I think if thinking about book clubs, I want to just be real cognizant of our time, and we have a little bit more to cover. But Merrick, is that something you'd like to talk about maybe? And I could maybe throw that over the steering committee and ask them to.
Yeah, I'd be interested just to see how other people are running it too. But sorry, get back on topic. I'm sorry.
Perfect. No, it's totally fine. Thanks for asking the question. I will forward that over to Darcy and the steering committee and ask if somebody would be willing to maybe host an hour on book clubs.
Cool. So Rebecca, this is Susan. I have one question about your Schoology section. So in elementary, we have 6 Schoology pages.
Yeah.
For library, 1 for each grade. So I would notice that it looks like you only have 1. Is there a way to like consolidate? I know a lot of that was for developing coursework. But if we wanted to do a come to the library event, it would be nicer not to have 6 of them.
Yeah, there is a way to do that. You need to work with whomever in your building is your registrar or your PowerSchool guru. They can help with that and help either consolidate all of your courses into one or create a new course that has everyone. So if you wanted to keep your 1 through 6 or whatever, whatever your numbers are. But
Rebecca, this is Tuesday.
Yeah.
Susan, you just need to link your courses. So you can do everything you just said, or you can link your courses. So you don't need to recreate the wheel, but we can talk about that later, and there's an easy way to do it.
Perfect. Thanks for the help.
Thanks, Susie. Okay. Anatomy of a post. Really, I just pulled this one up. This is a Ballard High School Twitter post. Tuesday is like the queen of making sure that like she hits all the really important parts. One of the things again, we talked about graphics. We have already a little bit talked about potential issues with student faces. One of the things I think is kind of fun is to try and figure out ways when I'm taking photographs of students in school to capture the essence of what's happening, but avoid their faces. And so that's kind of a fun little game I play, but we're not with them now. So, but that's something else, you can use. There's lots of tools you can use when you do have images of students. The one that I use most frequently is PixArt. But there's plenty of free apps that you could use if you wanted to, blur a face or throw an emoji over a kid's head or whatever it happens to be. There's lots of resources and tools available for that. You want to have a post defining hashtag. How do you want this to be searchable? And so, right now, a couple of the biggest is hashtag SPS Connects. You can see kind of the tail end of that here in Tuesday's post. Got truncated a little bit in my insert of my image, but how are people going to come back to this? For my Eagle Staff Prime, right? That's the hashtag. The hashtag is not something that's conversational, right? It should fit into whatever sentence it is, but just really thinking about being intentional with your hashtags is important. You want to tag or to make connections and increase visibility. You can see just in this one, it's Meet Libby, Hoopla Digital, UW iSchool, SPL Buzz, and Haley Holo. I don't know the rest of that one. I think there might be more, but you can see that she's increasing visibility by adding the people that are in some way connected with this post. And so that's really important. And then using emojis to help draw the eye towards the post. As a user scrolling through a feed, the emojis kind of break it up and help people to see maybe what's there. The graphic and the emojis really do work in concert with each other to draw someone towards your posts. Best practice. These are guidelines again. Thanks Tuesday and the Georgia School Libraries Association for helping with this, but spend 5 to 10 minutes a day on social media to see what the librarians or colleagues have posted. I'll be honest, I'm like far over that allotment at this point, but it's because so much of our work is embedded in technology right now. And maybe even if you're just starting, start with at least 3 school librarians and then start branching out to regional and national school librarians or others in your building. Set yourself a time limit or goal, for example, 5 to 10 minutes every other day, interfacing with other followers, finding new people, follow a favorite author, a local bookstore, professional organization. How are you going to build like your community online? Aim for some variety in posts to keep things interesting. I met a woman who actually is down in Nashville, Tennessee. I was on a Zoom call with the Project Lit chapters this week. And just in the chat, she noticed that I was from Seattle and her sister lives in Ravenna. And she wants to come up, you know, and move eventually up here. And she was asking about Seattle Public Schools high school libraries. And, you know, it was really interesting to do that. And she actually sent me 2 different Instagram feeds that she has, and one is she just uses for book recommendations, and so it's just pictures of books, but that's the intent, right, for that particular Instagram that she has. And then her library Instagram has more of that variety. Be social media buddies. Like work with either, you could start with, you know, middle school librarians or your region as far as your red days are concerned, or, you know, people you just generally are drawn towards in our profession and in our district, and really like hype each other up, retweet. It doesn't even have to be like, you don't have to have a lot to say, but really sharing the work that we're doing is going to increase our audience and help with promotion of the work that you're doing. And last but not least, always ask for guidance if you feel lost, confused, or something goes wrong, right? Because sometimes the truth of the matter is that things can go wrong. And I recently had one night I was sitting at home and all of a sudden I started getting these private, like I was getting messages and I couldn't figure out why. And I went to look at, somebody had gone and created an account and they came and they were like literally attacking directly individual tweets that I had done like within 6 months. They went back through, somebody was bored or mad or whatever, but they were saying things like, "You're what's wrong with education." And I was like totally taken aback. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But there were steps that I could take. One, first block that user, to, you know, consult with my principal, make sure she knows it's happening, but to not feel that I was by myself in that moment, just because this had happened, and to allow for some perspective, and do that. These things can happen. They don't happen very often, but you shouldn't feel like you have to know how to do this. And if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling like going into that 5 or 10 minutes is not something, you know, you're pulling back from that, like stop and just go ahead and have a conversation with somebody that you trust. I'm happy to talk with anybody if you're feeling, you know, any of those things. But really, truly, in the end, it boils down to making connections. The intent and the use of social media is to build social capital and to really, you know, make sure that you have connections and ways to communicate with your building, with your families, and our school district. Follow and create hashtags. I went through the document that is linked here, and these are just some of the ones that were there. I mentioned Eagle Staff Prime, SPS Connects. Don't Shush Me is one that came up last spring. This is their library. Where I Read, the Where I Read campaign is something that we'd planned to push out, I think as a core for spring break. Well, it's spring break. We could, you know, we're all reading at home a little differently. Libraries transform. We need diverse books. That's the other thing, is if you follow a hashtag, you know, ditch that text is one that I follow. You can type that into your platform and then you can see all the posts that are also using that hashtag. Bulldogs Read, SPS Librarians. If you are highlighting the work of a colleague, SPS Librarians, Seattle Super Readers, Maker's Gonna Make. I know a number of you have been posting activities online. I think Tuesday and Lindy did a zine, quarantine zine. That was really cool. when I'm not reading, sharing a little bit about yourself too. It doesn't have to be just work. Like let your families know who you are. Reading Marmots Better Together, Beaver Readers, and Let Them Have Books are just some. But think about like what makes sense for you and your school. And then really quickly, again, I mentioned the Georgia Library Media Association and Tuesday Chambers, who did indeed provide a large majority of the structure and content for this presentation. There's another link here to the social media handles if you haven't added yours and you have one, or if you are going to go and create one and start posting. The minute you start following other people, they're going to get a notice. So-and-so is following you now, and they're going to follow you back because that's the way we roll. We do have lots of leaders in our library and core as far as use of social media, and don't hesitate to reach out to them as you start on this journey. And again, just a shout out for Canva on Friday. And then I also, if you have anybody, or if you even wanted to come back and do this again on Thursday, you could do that as well. That is the end of the formal presentation. Almost got rid of us there. We have a little bit of time if you have questions.
I will ask the question.
Sure.
Is Elaine.
Hi.
I do not own a smartphone. I am not willing to get a smartphone. Anything that I do is going to have to be done from my computer.
Mm-hmm.
Can I do all of this?
Yeah. If you're going to choose between the two, between Twitter and Instagram, for example, my recommendation would be to start with Twitter. You can do it on a computer, for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I will do it then.
Yay, Elaine. Awesome.
Hey, Rebecca, this is Colleen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change my present use Twitter handle, something that focuses on the library. Right now, it's just me, West Seattle. And but my Instagram account, and I guess back up here, my Twitter is really fairly professional and just that. But for my Instagram, I have a lot of, family connections there. So I want to have one that is more focused just on the library. And so I'm stuck a little bit on that one. And I know that you talked about having 2 accounts there. Do you have any just quick suggestions for me? I was responding to a teacher who had an email to me quick, and I think it happened to be at the same time. So sorry if I missed
So
that.
your question is, just so I understand, you want to, will you ask it again? I'm sorry.
I have an additional Instagram account and how to keep those separate on my phone. Should I just, is a log in and log out situation or?
So Instagram, I'm not familiar with if you can do 2 accounts. Does anybody in our chat right now have 2 Instagram accounts, and what does that look like on?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you speak?
I actually have 3. It's very easy to toggle between them.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want? I can just show
Go for
people
it, Kelsey.
quickly.
That'd be great.
So when you pull up your account,
Mm-hmm.
In the bottom corner is your little person. And then like if you click kind of your homepage and then it shows your name up at the top.
Right.
Click on your account name. Sorry, this is hard to do when I'm also facing it. Click your name and then like all your accounts show up that you're logged into, and then you would just click on the other one that you want to go to, and then I pop to my personal one.
Okay.
And it's really clear when you're posting. Let me just, if you create a post and then when you get to the final page, it is really obvious which it's really obvious which accounts you're posting to, so you could select multiple accounts, or it's really clear, so you're not accidentally posting something to the wrong account. Yeah, it's really easy to do.
Great, thanks, super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And just, I hadn't actually talked about it, but just a reminder, on Instagram, for example, I have lots of students that follow me. I never follow my students. Just to be clear, like that's a boundary that I just don't cross. They can follow me. I don't need to follow them. And we hadn't talked about maybe some of those boundaries and how they apply in this particular environment. Luke, you asked a question about how you might encourage students to follow your Instagram account. And then Tuesday mentioned, have your principal shout it out there. I think, one of the other things is like looking at your school newsletter, put it on Schoology, have your teachers, for example, make it an assignment. If you have an Instagram account, go and follow, or, think about other ways that could, be a way. You could even say, hey, I'm going to have a drawing over the next 48 hours for any student that follows our Instagram account. You'll be entered in the drawing for whatever. Like you could think about ways that, that you might want to have them do that. Yeah, and for sure, like if you have other accounts, Tuesday, that's a great point. If the band says, hey, go follow the library, if the soccer team says, hey, go follow the library or whatever like that, that's another way you can do that. If you have kids that are already following those accounts, it leads them to you, and the ASB too, for sure. We have a couple more minutes for questions if anybody has them. This is awesome. It was really great to be here with all of you. As disconnected as it actually is, it feels really nice to see your faces and to think about our work together moving forward. I know that my time in my building is this afternoon. I'm frantically trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I get in there, switch out some books and water my plants and feed the fish and make sure they're still alive. But happy to continue to support you all. If you have questions, you've heard from Kelsey, you've heard from Tuesday. We know Stacey's a great resource. Claire Scott at Lincoln, just kind of off the top of my head. Debbie is also a great resource. Aaron Sterling over at Eckstein for sure. So there are lots of folks that you could reach out to, and choose whomever is the best fit for you, and don't let that be a barrier for continuing to do this work and sharing all the amazing things that you are doing. Thank you so much. It was a delight to be here with you all. I hope to see some of you on Friday for Canva.
Bye, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.